Hello, and welcome back to the Less is More Education podcast with your host, Steve Flores. And today we interview Shannon Regli. Shannon is a former chemistry teacher for Troy High School. She worked in public education for 20 years before leaving to start her own tutoring business. She was there for the beginning of my own teaching career. She was one of the teachers that I observed as a part of my teacher credentialing program, which is one of the things that we talk about. We also talk about the consequences of the 98 standards and GSS, the expectations on teachers, and our reasons for leaving public education. And later on, towards the end, we also talk about possible fixes to a lot of the problems that we saw plaguing our education system. We hope that you enjoy the podcast, and please like and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out by reaching out to us. The email is lessismore.education@skiff.com. That's skiff.com. You can find us on Instagram at lessismore.education, on Twitter at lessismoreeduc1. Our website is lessismore.education. Our YouTube is going to be linked below. And if you want to support us, you can go to our Patreon at patreon.com/lessismoreeducation. I also want to give shout outs to Agnes Gonzalez, who's running for the Roland Unified School District School Board. And also check out our other podcast, which is The Generational Divide with co-host Jason Pasigan, who was my former student. And it's pretty fun to talk to him. I suggest the episode called Telomania. That one gets really deep. I hope you enjoy that episode and this one as well. Now, here's my interview with Shannon Regli. Well, let's just start with you as an individual. What was your educational life like? Like how were you as a student in elementary school, in middle school, in high school, college, like that? Yeah.
Okay, so I lived in a small town and went to a very small rural school system, public schools, and I was kind of a quiet student. I was a very good student. I always was I have to do well. And my brother was a year ahead of me in school, and he always did well, and he didn't need to study very much, and he would just get A's. And so I was this year behind him, trying to live up to his standards in this small town where everyone knew, oh, your brother's Kevin. Oh yeah. So, but I was very quiet in class, and so it was hard for me to ask the questions. I didn't want to look stupid in front of my peers. I know that happens with so many students, but yeah, I would, so I would, I would ask the teachers after class or whatever. I would never raise my hand in the class. And so I always wanted to be a teacher. In high school, I wanted to be a teacher. So I always had that in the back of my mind. My dad is a teacher, and in the community college in our area. And
so did it start at high school, or did it start earlier?
I'd say earlier. I always when I would play with my friends, we would play school, though actually I was usually the student, not the teacher, but we all were into teaching was a thing, and I think because it was such a part of my family, and so I was just it seemed comfortable to me. And when I was in high school, then when I was taking chemistry, I thought I want to be a chemistry teacher, and I think that's not very common for most people in chemistry to be I want to be a chemistry teacher. But I did so I actually applied for a scholarship through the state at the time where they were trying to get more people into teaching, and it's they'll pay for years of basically 4 years of college if you promised basically to be teaching afterwards. So I did it, and I got the scholarship, and then went to college. And when I was finishing college, I realized I wanted to pursue a PhD at that point, and so I actually returned the money to the state because wow. I had to pay it back. Yeah. Because I thought, okay, I'm not going to teach at the high school level, and it was for teaching at primary and secondary levels. And
the PhD?
No, the scholarship.
Oh, the scholarship.
Yeah, okay, so I had to repay that. But I went on to get my PhD, and at that point, with 3 years into it, realized, you know what? No, I actually want to teach high school, and got my teaching credential. Everyone thought I was crazy at the time, but I really realized I liked that age group, and I connected well with that age, the high school group, and that whole idea of me not wanting to ask questions in class. I knew that was how the kids were, and I was, okay, I'm not going to pressure this kid to like talk in class. I'm going to let them come to me, and I always wanted to be very approachable as a teacher, because I feel like, it's scary, because there are a lot of scary teachers out there who, I as an adult feel like, I couldn't ask that person a question about how to do something. So
especially in the moment in the classroom. And it's smart that you got out when you did, the PhD program, because that's a brutal program to go through. My wife went through that. She wound up being a teacher, but she completed the program because after a certain point, you're so far in that it's like they start telling you, oh, you only have like maybe a year left, and then you can go like, oh, you're already published. You can go probably like in a couple of years.
Right.
And if you just get this done or get this done. And then it wound up, she got published really early on. I think it was like her third year in, second or third year in.
Yeah.
And then they just kept promising her she would graduate for another 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
just...
it's the, and when you're in the graduate school world, and you're surrounded by that, and you feel like it's the only way to go, and everyone around you is going into research or, being a professor. And so I remember 3 years in, I went and I interviewed all the female professors in the department, not all of them, but a lot of them, and just said, I at some point in my life, I want to be a mom. I want to, do these things. I said, tell me what your experience is as a professor. How has it been female and a professor in science? And one person, I think, was able to do both things, to be a mom and be a professor, and feel like that they were doing okay in both of those things. Whereas many of them, it was just like, it's just really, and she set up boundaries very early on where, like, if my daughter has, a ballet recital and I have a meeting, like, I tell them I'm going to the ballet, sorry. Yeah. And so, like, but that, when you're trying to get tenure in a university system, it's so difficult, and so you have to give up so much. And my own advisor, who was male, but he was, his wife was living in Alaska. He's here at UC Irvine, and and his children at that point were grown. But it was like, I watched their lives sort of. It was very difficult for their relationship and their lives, and it was like, well, that's not a very good indication of it's not what I want in my life. And so I decided, what, if I want to teach and I want to teach high school, there's no reason to get the PhD. Like, what's the point? Like, I could get a little farther on the pay scale, but in the end, it's not even worth that. And so I had to really break free of that idea, like, you should just get the PhD because you're 3 years in. And I did, and I was very happy with that decision to change course.
Did you wind up mastering out, or
I got my master's.
Yeah, okay. So that's a positive.
Yeah. So I got the master's in chem and
avoided the trap.
Yeah, so got that then, and then it was crazy to me to think, okay, now I have to go back and get my teaching credential. Even though I have spent 3 years in grad school in chemistry, like, I have to prove that I understand chemistry. So
that's
the education program, I felt, I wasn't so impressed with the teaching programs.
That's been my experience, and a lot of newer teachers that I talk to, it also seems to be their experience, right? And after doing a lot of, like, research, especially in psychology and social psychology, you actually start to find that a lot of what you're being taught in the teacher credentialing program is, like, outdated or just straight up not even true. Yeah. And very small percentage of it mesh up with what you experience in the classroom.
Right.
You know, like this whole, like I was taught about multiple intelligences and all that, and I was like, that doesn't seem to be
I got that.
true.
Yeah.
In my classroom.
Yeah.
And then other research was just put out that basically disproved that. Like, no, there tends to be this thing called a G factor, which is generalized intelligence, and it's intimately connected to IQ, right? And then so it seems like there isn't it's a really hard problem because like G and IQ are really connected, and what it looks to be is that there's preferences, right? So there's people that have high IQ and they have preferences towards certain topics. So if you take a look at, like, let's say basketball players, and then you give an IQ test to like an NBA player, a high school player, and a college player, right? So they're at different levels. And what you'll start to see is that the more successful players also tend to have higher IQs than the less successful players. So it's like, oh, you can't like tease that out for some reason, right? And so then you start to look at, all right, well, what's the correlation? The correlation is pretty high. It's like 0.7 or so between like your IQ and then like your success at any given task. So there seems to be like a large part of how successful you are is like this general intelligence that people tend to have that's kind of related to working memory, that's kind of related to, you know, abstract thinking and spatial reasoning and all that, that tends to play out. Now, there are some people, like there's a guy named Scott Barry Kaufman who wrote this whole book called Ungifted, because he was labeled as learning disabled as a kid, right? And he felt like this label prevented him from being or from rising in his success or being able to show people that he was actually intelligent his whole life. He later on wound up going to Carnegie Mellon and then graduating with a PhD from I think it was Stanford or Cornell. I don't remember where, but he rose up, you know, and he like disproved everyone about like, oh, like you can't just be putting labels onto people, and there's more to intelligence. And so he has this whole book on like why IQ isn't everything, right? And what are the types of things that it's missing in an IQ environment. So because it's a very artificial environment to take an IQ test. Like first off, like you're being asked to like sit down and concentrate for like an hour to 90 minutes, right? Which is, if you have a predisposition to like needing to move around and stuff, you're already at a disadvantage.
Right.
Like secondly, the IQ tests are normalized to like the general population. So it's not measuring like your ability to increase your intelligence with time. It just compares you to everyone else at that specific moment in time. Right? So it can be used as a diagnostic to try and help people, but it should not be used as an absolute measure of like somebody's intelligence, because people's intelligences can increase with time, right? As you get more experiences and all that.
I mean, that makes sense.
Right? Yeah. And then so he also wound up later on finding like this other thing called emotional intelligence that did not correlate at all with IQ, right? And so that was like his kind of big claim to fame thing.
Okay, yeah. I've heard
So
about that.
there is something else out there that also matters a lot, right? Because emotional intelligence really becomes a big part of your success if you have to work with people. Right? So if you're like a salesman or a teacher or, you know, and you're able to pay attention and be aware of people's emotions or states of minds and adapt yourself to that, that matters a lot.
Emotional intelligence,
Especially in teaching.
Yeah.
So IQ is not everything. It's not the end all be all. Multiple intelligence is not like but we still seem to be trapped in our education system by all of these things, right?
Yeah. I remember like the program, I just felt like was like you said, there was a lot of things that didn't really help at all. Well, most of the things I found like didn't help me at all in the classroom. Nothing like prepared me.
A 20-page lesson plan is not helpful.
Like not at all. And I never wrote a lesson plan after that. I feel like everything that they had me do, and like I remember the activities like that they were having me do. I felt like I was like a kindergarten class would be great with this, but a high school class, no.
Right,
and I'm in a high school program, so you'd think that they would be able to know that like they're gonna laugh you out of there if you were. And I was just a student teacher, or not even a student teacher, but I was thinking, I know high school kids are not going to respond well to this like activity or whatever, and everyone else was just doing it like, oh yeah, let's do it. And I just had a very hard time with just going along with something like, just because it was like someone's idea of what education should be. And then they, you until you're in the classroom, like nothing really prepares you for it. No one, I feel like, ever really like the logistics of teaching. Like I really wished there was more of that. Like how do you really run your day? How do you do, at least in my program, there was none of that. It was just like, very like, I don't know, the not useful things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's something that's missing in our education system as a whole, because those types of skills of like just time management, like being able to manage, like you're not just like your physical resources, but your emotional resources, your willpower, all that. Like, how do we do that? Yeah. Because that is necessary to being successful later on in life. That's not just something that, I don't know, your parents should probably teach you that or whatever.
Right. Like, no, but it's so true. Like for students, for everybody, we need to know those things because, and in real life and everything, like, being able to deal with finances and rent and, and I know that when I was in school, there were more like I never took any classes like that, but there were classes that were around like more application to your life. And I think that we've definitely gone away from that, and it's unfortunate because...
Yeah, I think that's a consequence of the 98 standards.
Yeah, and that was right when I started teaching I started in 97, so it was right when I basically came in when the standards were just sort of like coming in with
because it was right
California
after that
standards and stuff. Yeah,
that all the other classes started to get eliminated, right? Yeah. So like your wood shop, your ceramics classes,
exactly,
like
all
anything that wasn't guided towards college, I felt like slowly got eliminated with time.
Because my student teaching experience, it was at a school called Arroyo Grande in the Central Coast. I was a student at Cal Poly, and I student taught at Arroyo Grande. And the thing that I loved about that program was they had these relationships with many companies, and they had special programs where the kids would then take classes specifically for their particular company or their direction. And for example, there was
vocational.
Yeah, and it was like Toyota put a big amount of money into the school, and they had a mechanics program that was a Toyota mechanics program, and they had all the computers and and so I remember before I was student teaching, I would just observe students, and I would walk around. I walked around with this one student that day, and he was in the program, and I was watching like how they did it. It was so amazing. And the way it worked is if you did the 2 years in that program at the high school, and you did 1 year after high school in the Toyota mechanics program, you were a Toyota mechanic, making like 6 figures almost. It was crazy. Like these kids were set up for success early, I was really impressed with that program.
And when I was teaching, that's what a lot of my students didn't seem to understand, is that this college path isn't the only path to success. Like when I would tell them that, it's like they heard this for the very first time in their lives. Right? Because the message that they conveyed to me was, it's either this or go work at McDonald's, right? Either go to college or go work at McDonald's, or like I'm not going to be successful, because that's what all the statistics seem to say if I don't go to college, right? And I'm like, no, the statistics say that the likelihood that you will earn more in your lifetime is higher with college, but that doesn't mean that you can't be successful without it. Right, you're gonna need something else on top of your high school diploma.
A program, a tech program, something.
But a 4-year university isn't necessarily that thing for everyone, even though it's being pushed by counselors, by teachers, by administrators, by the state. And then now that push got turned into like a cultural push of parents, coming down on their kids saying like, you got to do this because you got to go to college.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Nobody's ever sitting down with the kids and asking them like, well, what is it that you want to do? Like, what is it that you're good at? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are you like passionate about? Where's your curiosity? Like, where do you feel like the most like you're playing versus working? Right. And none of those conversations are being had with the students at all.
No.
And they're being pushed like all into one direction. And you can see it in like graduation requirements, because your graduation requirements are tied through A to G. A to G are the minimum requirements that you need to get into a Cal State or UC, right? Like all these things are intimately connected to each other. You can't tease them apart because of the way the system's been set up. And now what I see is like the state's looking at all this and realizing, oh, maybe this isn't such a good idea. We'll add in career and technical training into a possible track for high school. But then what they don't do is to give you the supports that you need to transition to that. Then there's so much momentum already towards getting kids into college. Like that's in the structure of high schools in particular, that they don't want to change. Right? Like there's no incentive for them to go like, oh, now I got to add in all these other career tracks. I got to like hire people. I got to buy all the equipment. I gotta, like, it's like, well, thanks for nothing, but we're just easier.
Here. We're doing this.
We're just gonna, and that seems to be like where we're stuck.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I think back to my own high school and all the different programs that were in it, and the wood shop, the different things, and those all went by the wayside.
Yeah. When I remember even in middle school, this is in the 90s. We had somebody come in. No, this was my 6th grade. So I was in elementary school. We had somebody from one of the oil companies come by and go like, hey, like we're looking for people that, want to work out, because I live right by an oil field.
Okay.
Right. It's decommissioned now, but it's a weird spot, Whittier, so right next door was Santa Fe Springs, and that was all oil wells. It's kind of weird because if you look at it now, they just like got rid of all the oil rigs and then put up apartments and stuff. So he's like looking at each place, I wonder what's in their groundwater.
Yeah, exactly. The soil's probably not so clean.
So, but they were making a push of like, hey, if you we're offering all these scholarships if you want to go into like engineering, or if you want to go into like even just working out in the field and stuff, and they had programs like that. And then by the time I made into high school, which is like in 98, so it gives you the reference in time there. But all that was gone, right? And then that's when we started pushing everyone into like to college more. College track.
I guess it was around the No Child Left Behind sort of that era of. I feel like that was everything was sort of pushed towards. The Nickelby. Oh my god, the terms. And we had the Golden State exams. I remember those came in, and like the
that's when all the exams. Now they're trying to consolidate them. They're still there. So in science, because now they have it by subject, right? So instead of having it for like each individual subject, they just have, all right, 3rd grade. I think it's 3rd grade. No, it's 5th grade.
Right.
8th grade. And junior or senior year. Like they let the schools decide if you want to do it junior or senior year. I didn't know that. I thought it was always junior year. So some schools will make it senior year, some schools will make it junior year. It just depends on when. But there's still like high stakes tests.
Yeah, and then it's now in science it's biochem physics and Earth. And Earth is just thrown in with all the other subjects.
Is integrated into all of them.
Which I feel like is not, in my personal opinion, I don't feel like is done well.
No.
And I look at the chemistry programs now in a lot of the schools, and they're trying to throw earth science in places that don't really make sense. You're just straight up learning earth science at this point, and it's we were now lacking the basic chemistry knowledge. And so how are we applying it when we don't even really understand how chemistry works? And now we're going, okay, let's throw in the, stuff about lava and the viscosity of lava and why is the, okay. Like that's just, I feel like that we're jumping over some basics that have just gone by the wayside. For the subject. And it doesn't flow, to me, it doesn't flow. A lot of the topics, they just sort of feel like they were just like patched in, like, okay, let's throw in earthquakes. I'm tutoring a student right now whose program is exactly that. And she's like, I said, okay, we went from doing thermochem last week to, okay, now we're
seismology.
Like, yes, it was. And I said, oh, okay, well, we'll start reviewing some like stuff about the earth now, and completely like changing topics, like this. And this is only the beginning of the school year where, usually when you're kind of learning about what is chemistry, and now it's like, okay, what is an earthquake?
Yeah. Have you seen the new set of standards?
Sort of. I mean, not
the
completely.
3D NGSS.
No.
Like, oh wow, like it's a. Okay, I don't know what the expectation was for the people that put this out.
Yeah.
But I was at the forefront of all this. So I joined what was called the Science Fellows at my school district back in 2013, I think. And then 2014, that turned into the rollout team, the NGSS rollout team. Right? And so NGSS is the next generation of science standards. And it has like these 3 strands, like you have your DCIs, which is like the actual content.
Right.
You have your CCCs, which are cross-cutting concepts, which are things that are true across all subject areas. And then you have your SEPs, which are the science and engineering practices, which is how you actually perform science. Right. And then they bundled these into like these 3s, like called performance expectations. And then so each performance expectation takes an SEP, a DCI, and a CCC, bundles them together, and then that's how they set up the curriculum as like 47 of these. So each performance expectation is like 2 pages long if you want to read the whole thing. And then you have to teach 47 of those in a school year. Right. Bonkers. Yeah. Doesn't make sense at all. Right? Like, I spent years looking at this stuff, right? And I feel like maybe in 2019, 2020, maybe even later, 2021, I started to get a sense of it all.
Like, you're like, okay, and 5-6 years in.
I was a person spending time on a district level going to these rollout meetings put on by LAUSD, going to all these conferences from NSTA, which is National Science Teachers Association, the California Science Teachers Association. Like, I was going all over the place trying to learn this stuff. And it took me like a good solid 6 years to barely start to wrap my head around it. Right. And then we're expecting the entire state, every science teacher in the entire state, including elementary school teachers who have very little science background, no science background whatsoever, to wrap their heads around this monster that is NGSS. Yeah. Doesn't make sense.
Well, and then in elementary teachers, you're also having to deal with the Common Core and this, and there's so many, how can you possibly have the time?
Yeah, and then you see the skills that are coming up with all this Common Core stuff, and it's like, well, I feel like it really depends on the teacher, because
very much,
most of my students, their skills just dropped, like precipitously once Common Core came out.
I agree. I mean, and with my own children who are now seniors, they came up in the Common Core, and 3rd grade was kind of when it sort of hit, and I could see where. And I'm not blaming the teachers at all, but like I could see where some of the teachers didn't understand the math, and therefore they were dependent fully on the answer key for the book. And the answer that they would give was actually completely correct mathematically, but yet the teacher would mark it wrong because they're looking at like these boxes and these and it was just became like
focus on the process versus on like the result.
But they would get it wrong, which, okay, if you're supposed to be focusing on the process, then their process is completely correct, and they got the same answer, but their process was different than, for example, they had these little boxes where it was like a grid of 100 squares, and they had to like 2 times 9. They had to show it when they like highlighted the little like boxes, and so they had to like highlight like 2 rows of 9, and I think my son did 9 rows of 2, which in math 9 and 2 and 2 and 9 are that's a big thing to understand, that they are the same, and no points. You got it wrong because you highlighted it in the opposite direction, and that's 9 times 2, not 2 times 9. Even though they're both. I forget the term for that rule in math. But so what are we teaching them?
Right.
Like, what does that mean? Like, if they're now not understanding that 9 times 2 and 2 times 9 are the same.
Yeah.
And that their process was not. They highlighted the boxes in the other direction.
Yeah. So it's not just the focus on the process. It's focus on the process that I want you to do.
Exactly. The focus on the process that the book shows.
Right. So it's like more, I don't know, feels like authoritative.
Yeah, because like okay, if Common Core is supposed to be about the process, then both answers should be correct.
Yes, yeah.
Because they're both understanding that you have 18 boxes highlighted in your page, and 2 and 9 is 18. So there are different ways to approach that, and I thought that was what Common Core was supposed to be until I started to see these kinds of answers being marked wrong.
Yeah, and I think
then it makes it frustrating for the student.
Yeah, is that part of the problem is that teaching here is a very isolated task, right? So it's not like we're given a whole lot of extra time to talk to coworkers, talk to experts, get retrained or anything. All of those things either happen in that 1 week before school starts, which is our in-service week,
right?
Of which is
You're trying to organize your classroom and get ready for the school year as well. Yes.
Or it's all being done on your own time after school, or during late start meetings, which most schools tend to have, but most of those late start meetings wind up being taken up by the admin so that they can tell you about all the requirements that they want you to have as well.
Right.
So what we have is a system that's very top heavy.
Yes. That
sucks up time from teachers, whatever little time that we have.
Yeah.
And we've isolated all the teachers.
Yeah.
And we're telling them, this is what was happening at my school, was you have to be a part of a PLC, a learning team.
Yeah.
Right? We're not going to give you a whole lot of time to do this, right? And the little time that you have, we're going to occupy a lot of it with our own stuff.
Yeah, and I found it, from my experience, there was a lot of, the administration didn't trust that we were going to actually utilize that time if it wasn't something that they had from the top down said, okay, you have to do these 3 things. Whereas if I had that time to work with my coworkers on like, okay, let's redesign this unit in chemistry, for example, like they're not going to see the results themselves to know that we did that. We sat there and we weren't just, goofing around or whatever they think that was happening with us. So I felt like that became frustrating to me because I felt like there was no trust that I was trying to do what was best for myself and for my students. It was more about like checking a box saying, oh, did you do this in your PLC meeting? Did you do this? Did you do that?
Yeah.
And it wasn't about the actual outcome of like, how am I going to be a better teacher? It's that, okay, yeah, I did all those things that you asked me to do.
Feels a lot like your experience with Common Core again.
Exactly. Like, why are we... Yeah, exactly. So that became really frustrating because, I just want to teach. I want to be able to teach my students better, and I want to have the time to, like you said, work with your coworkers and colleagues and design something that's going to be effective. And especially when you're throwing these new curriculum, new standards, new you have to wrap your mind around it. Like you said, it took you 6 years or so to really wrap your mind around it, and you were working with it diligently. And so how are we supposed to do that? And if you're an elementary school teacher, you're trying to do that in many different subjects. So it's not just chemistry that you're working on. You're working on the math and the English and this and that.
Yeah, when you look at the time invested that elementary schools or elementary school teachers invest, they invest way more time in the other parts, the reading, the writing, and all that. And then they put science out into the back burner. And I'm like, well, yeah, that kind of makes sense, right? If that's not your expertise, if that's not like a strong point, and if you look at these monsters of standards, of course, I would probably do that too. Yeah.
Right, because it's not your strong suit. You're like, okay, I wasn't really studying that. I was, a humanities major of some kind, and so like I'm going to really focus on those things. It makes total sense to me. Luckily, at my kids' elementary school, we were lucky to have a separate science teacher where they got to go to her class, I think like twice a week. And that teacher, she was so passionate about science and was really getting them into doing like little labs and things. And it was really, really great because you don't usually have that. And so they were fortunate to have that. And I would sometimes talk with the science teacher because she knew I was a chemistry teacher, and we would talk about ideas and things. She would run ideas by me of what we could do. And
that's cool.
And I would go into the classroom sometimes and do like lessons for the kids when my kids were little, and I could see the teachers were, they just didn't have the ability to do those things.
Yes.
Because and also the time, we expect so much of teachers, and we don't want to pay them for it.
Right. Yeah.
And not only that, but also the materials in your classroom. How much of that do you spend your own money on?
Oh yeah.
You're like, I want my kids to do this.
Yeah. There's a lot of last-minute trips to Home Depot, to
the dollar store, trying to get
a lot of time at the dollar store.
Yes, trying to get the things. Cause if I had these things, I could do this activity.
Because the other option is you could go through your department, but that's going to take months.
Yeah. So for next year, maybe.
Yeah.
You need to
and depending
show
on
why
how much of a budget you
as
have.
Exactly.
As well.
You have to. And so at that point it becomes either I don't do this activity or I go spend my own money on it. And so of course that's what 95% of teachers are doing. And, we don't make a lot of money to start with, and then we're expected to be grading and working on things on the weekends and nights. It's just a lot of expectations on teachers. And I think that this is why there's a demand for teachers right now, because people are realizing it's a lot of work, and especially with the pandemic hitting and throwing all that in.
Yeah, there's a lot of elements to that, right? Because A, you're not getting compensated very well.
No.
B, your work is going to be very difficult. C, it's in California, there's a lot of lip service to teachers are so brave or whatever. But we're not respected other professionals, right? So where is the incentive to become a teacher there?
Right.
Okay, so with all that being said, I kind of want to shift to, all right, what are successful places around the world doing that's different than what we are doing? Because I don't want to like I said earlier, I don't want to have some utopian ideal or whatever.
Right.
Right. So let's talk about teachers to begin with.
Yeah.
In most places where they have successful school or successful education systems, so we're talking about Finland, Singapore, Shanghai, Canada, and Australia. Okay. Right? So they tend to have the highest scores on PISA tests. These are international tests. And so if you look at what they're doing that's different, on the teacher end, they spend a lot of time filtering out who can become a teacher, okay? So they look for two basic qualities, your capability, or three basic qualities. Your knowledge of the subject area, whatever subject area you choose, your pedagogical skills, so how well you can teach these things, and your personality traits. They actually screen for personality.
Wow.
Right? Imagine
No, I feel like that would never work here. I feel like no one will accept that.
So a lot of places screen out like people that have like combative or disagreeable or you know that or just that will have issues connecting with students. Right. Which, you know, that's okay. All right. Now, if you just start that, implement that here, that's not going to go well. Right. Yeah, now you're just going to eliminate all the teachers. But here's the other, But here's the other aspect, right? Is they successful education systems look at the starting salaries of other professions and set teacher pay to those salaries. Oh, wow. So there's some places where they look at engineers, starting salaries of engineers, starting salaries of architects, starting salaries of other like professions, and then they set starting salaries of teachers to those high salaries. Right. And then they try to like keep up with them as they go up in the career ladder. So now what you're doing is you're making teaching a respectable job. Yes. Right? And you're treating it like professionals, and you're doing that work of getting people that are of high quality to do that work. Okay? So that's good. Now, ironically, what winds up happening is these teacher programs have to have limits to how many teachers they can take in because everyone wants to be a teacher now. Now there's no supply issue with teachers, right? So, okay, we've already taken care of that. Thing number 2, let's talk about like in the classroom and treating teachers right in the classroom. All 5 of these countries their teachers spend less time with their students than we do. Wow. Okay? All 5 of them. And it's a significant amount, right? So for some places, it ranges between, they do 15 to 18 hours with their students a week, right? So if you look at, well, how much are we spending? Yeah. Well, we have an hour-long period, 5 times a week, right? That's the way my structure was. And so that's 25 hours, right? So that's, with one class, right? And so that's an incredible amount. Like, that's a lot more.
That's big
percent
more, yeah.
Getting worse results. So let's think about that for a second, right? Okay, so they spend less time with their students. Well, what are they doing with their other time? Right. Well, with their other time, they set up cultures of collaboration. So as an example is Finland. Finland never lets you teach alone, ever. Starting from your teaching credentialing program, right? So let's say you want to be a primary school teacher, right? So primary school for them is 1st through 9th grades, right? Okay. They don't really have grades, but the 1st through 9 years of whatever it is you call school, right? So what they do is when you get into a teacher program, they set you up with another partner teacher who's going to be teaching something that's either the same or similar enough area to what you're going to be teaching. You go through the entire program with this person. You write up all of your lesson plans with this person, right? You are going out into the field to try out lessons with this person. You never leave this person. This person is your teammate for your entire program, right? And on top of that, the school gives you a support person. So your university gives you a support person. And there's a support person at the site you go to visit, right? So you're getting feedback constantly from your partner, from the school, your university, and from the school that you're visiting. Yeah, right? Good. And you're actually given clinical time. So the teacher that you're visiting gives you time to actually implement lessons that you've learned or you want to try out in their classroom. Yeah. Okay? And then you go back and you reflect on it with all these people. Yeah. How it went. So it's collaboration. Once you finish your program, that collaboration gets continued on when you actually get hired somewhere. So if you're a primary school teacher, the law basically says that for every 45 minutes of instruction, you have to give students a 15-minute break. Okay? So that's a break where like they're very independent in Finland. Finland's kind of like a unique place because it's already an expectation that by the time you're 8 years old, that you can walk yourself to and from the dentist by yourself. Like that's the level of autonomy that they have. So they say, all right, we're just going to release out the kids. 45 minutes is up. All the kids get released out, play together. All mixed age groups, whatever, 15 minutes, right? All the teachers leave their classrooms, go into the teacher's lounge, and have coffee. Now, because they've been set up in a culture of collaboration, they start to talk with each other. And they found that when you actually listen in on what they're talking about pedagogy.
Yeah.
They're talking about specific students and issues that specific students might have.
Yeah.
Right? So if I have a student this year, they're giving me problems, but you had them last year, I can go up and talk to you and see what worked. Right? And they're coming up with ideas on ways to collaborate on future lesson plans.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're given all this extra collaboration time. Other places like Singapore give a mandatory 15 hours a week to collaborate. Right? Wow. So that's not just in lesson planning, writing lesson plans together. It's also like if you want to grade papers. It's also if you want to like set up a study, because research is big in a lot of these countries where teachers lead research projects. Yeah. And then publish them to other teachers. And in places like Shanghai, those publications determine how high up you can go on the career ladder.
Okay.
Yeah. So, there's and most of these places have career ladders where like you aren't going to be a principal, you aren't going to be a superintendent unless you started as a teacher.
Yeah.
Right? Which is pretty important, which tends to happen here, but not always.
And I feel like though, like for me, like I've never had any interest in going into administration, and I feel like there's nothing to strive for if you don't want to be an administrator, right? Like I feel like there should be something like you're doing something towards bettering yourself all the time, but I don't know. It's like you either, do you want to be an administrator? No, I don't. I like to teach. That's why I'm here. I'm a teacher. But, it's just like there's no room for like growth, I feel like.
Yes. Yeah. Program. So other places do have creative ways of dealing with that. Like I think Singapore lets you go up the career ladder based on like your years of teaching, like how many publications you have, and you can get to a point where you can choose to give up some of your teaching time to do mentoring with other teachers.
Yeah.
Right? So you're still in the classroom,
right?
But you're also mentoring other teachers and helping them through their programs. So
which makes sense.
And you're not allowed to do that unless you've hit like a certain level, in your career, which sounds like it would be great, as far as like something to strive for.
Right.
Because it's like, okay, and you get extra money to,
and you
can
help teach somebody else like all the things that you've learned through the years of your teaching, because really that's where you learn things. Like that's when I was student teaching, like in my middle school student teaching, I had a really good mentor teacher, and she was so useful and helpful and really worked side by side with Mila, which sounded like the kind of the Finland model. And then my high school mentor teacher was the track coach, and he basically told me on day one that I was in his classroom. He's like, I have an invitational that I'm setting up, and it's going to be like in 2 months, and I need to work on that. So have fun.
Good luck.
And so like for me, I actually enjoyed it. I liked to have that autonomy, because I just wanted to just do it. But it was, definitely I can see how a lot of people would not like that at all. Because like I was teaching multiple chemistry classes and like, other classes and I'd never taught before, and it was just like, here you go, have fun, good luck. And he would check in with me like once a week, like literally, like, and I was teaching all these 3 or 4 of his classes. So no connection there. It was just like you sink or swim, and I feel like that's a lot of what goes on in the education programs here.
Yeah, and that's a problem, because that sink or swim mentality doesn't even make sense in terms of like the psychological research that's out there. Right? So if you look at the research, it basically points to the fact that like pressure, right? Let's talk about pressure. Like let's say you want to give somebody like a test to do on something, and you can look at these studies in college students, where if the student is learning something new, some novel task to do, and then you tell them like, all right, I'm going to time you, or this is going to count for a grade, right? Their performance drops, right? Like they do really bad.
Yeah.
But if you change it to like, all right, you look at people that are already adept at the task.
Yeah.
Right. So they mastered it. They've had plenty of time to practice it, and you go like, all right, now I'm going to time you and see how well you can do on this task. Their performance increases. Right. So your mastery of the level determines your performance. So if we take a new teacher that has no clinical experience whatsoever, that's out there writing out their own lesson plans, is isolated, and you just throw them into a classroom, and then you put in all these extra burdens onto them.
Yeah.
Like, that's why we have such high like new teacher burnout rates, right? Because it's like it's too much, right? They haven't developed the expertise to be able to perform under pressure, right? And psychologically, that just doesn't even make sense.
No.
Yeah, so like that's where I'm like, none of this makes sense, right? Like you don't. Yeah, there's some things that you can do to make it a little bit better. Like you can add playfulness. Playfulness actually increases performance. Like let's say you can give two people tasks. You can say like, all right, I'm going to grade you on this task, and then you can get another group of people and you can say like, all right, here's this thing I want to figure out. Can you guys figure it out? The people that are given that playful like I guess frame of mind go actually perform way better. They have more creative ideas. They are willing to fail more. They're willing to try more things out. And that's what we want in education, right? We want kids to be comfortable feeling like, oh yeah, I could fail at this, it's fine. It's not a big deal. The moment you start going like, you have to do this because you're getting ready for a test, or you're getting ready for this, or you're getting ready for that, right? You put that pressure onto them, and they're not content experts. Now what you're doing is you're setting them up for failure because their performance is going to go down. You're going to feel the anxiety. And so that playfulness, which is like what our friend like Steve Sogo, who we like loved at Laguna Beach, he like I would see him in his classroom and everything was play for him, like it was amazing. Like he would put on like a little character like in front of like he would be like the nutty professor in front of his kids, and then you talk to him like afterwards and he's like a normal person, and you're just like, whoa, this is crazy. And so he was able to introduce that playfulness, which probably made him like a successful teacher and pull in the kids and get them motivated to do things, which is something that I was like, wow, that's really an amazing skill to have. And I didn't realize that, there's actually some research support for this.
Showing that's
this is actually a thing, right? And kids will naturally play. And I'm actually finishing up a book called Free to Play, which is all about like the level of really technical things kids can learn just from being allowed to play. No interruption, mixed age groups, just go. Right? Which is like how a lot of us older generations kind of grew up.
That was my life,
Yeah, and that's the other thing that, we can get into later about like from the student perspective. But as far as teachers' perspectives are concerned, I don't see any reason why we can't implement some of these things. And if you're talking about like, all right, well, how are we going to get the money to pay teachers more? Well, here's a novel thought. In Finland, there is no accountability system for their schools, really.
No testing.
No, not from the state level. Right? So they have one like semi-high stakes test, right? Which is called matriculation when they hit their final year of education, and it's to determine their placement in a university.
Okay.
Right? That's it.
Yeah.
All other tests, assessments are all done in-house by teachers, right? And the reason why that works for them is that they expect all of their teachers to have a master's, right? So even before you get into the classroom, you've had 5 years of education, right? And you've had within that collaboration and clinical training.
Yeah.
Right?
That's important.
Yeah. And so they're like, fine. They're like, all right, we don't have to check up on you.
Yeah, that's the feeling I get a lot in our education system is they're just trying to check up on us.
Yeah. There's no trust whatsoever.
No trust.
Which means there's no autonomy.
When I first started at Troy, there was a good amount of trust. Like I felt like the principal was very, he was very, he basically said, I really I hire who I want to hire, and I let them do their job. And he was very focused on that, and and I just felt like, yeah, wow, there's so much trust here. And he just like, he just felt like, yeah, I hired you because you know what to do in your classroom. I don't know what to do in your classroom. Do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so freeing. It was so nice to feel trusted like that.
Yeah.
I feel like that is lacking a lot of times. And I feel like it's become more and more that way. And I don't know if it's because of the way the administration programs are in the educational system, where they're trying to say, you need to make sure that they're doing these jobs, and you have always these like tasks that you have to make sure that the teachers are doing.
And out come the check boxes.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about check boxes and making sure. And so their job depends on making sure that you're doing this. And so it becomes this like, nobody trusts anybody. And so you're just doing these tasks for what reason? Like those PLCs and the different days where you're in service days. I feel like a lot of times you're just doing things to do things, and it's not really like things that I can apply, right? How many of those meetings and things, and you're like, okay, I already know how to use Word, or I already know how to use Google Classroom, or I already know. Okay, we'll sit here and we'll do the task.
Do this again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote an essay on I call this friction, because science.
Yes.
Always like thinking about it like well, this really relates to like any vehicle or anything that you have, like a bike or a car or whatever, right? Like there's a reason why cars get really hot but bikes don't, right? And the problem with heat is that that's energy that once it leaves, it's gone. Mm-hmm. You can't capture it and use it anymore. Mm-hmm. And I feel like our education system is like that. With all the components that we add to it, it adds friction, mm-hmm. But we lose like money, energy, manpower, even like willpower. Yeah. Like how much willpower do you have after a crappy professional development meeting?
Yes.
Like it's just like, oh, now I don't want to do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's all friction. You can't get any of that stuff back.
No.
Right? So when you're constantly having to go through the check boxes, even if you are an administrator that goes like, yeah, I just got to come in, I'm going to check these off. I know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. This is just a formality or whatever. Mm-hmm. Right? Like it's still friction. Like we're still taking time away from that administrator, right?
Yeah.
That's still costing, taxpayers money.
Yeah.
Right? All this like energy that we're spending on, are you doing your job? Are you doing your job?
Yeah.
Schools, are you doing your job? Are you doing your job?
Yeah.
Are you doing your job? That's all money that is going to waste if we can set up a system where we trust our teachers. We can only trust our teachers if they're educated to a high degree.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And so all of this is connected. It's not just like, all right, the government has to get off our backs. We as teachers also have to be able to go like, all right, here's all the hurdles I went through to get here, right? You can lay off. It's fine. It's mm-hmm. okay. It's mm-hmm. coming from both directions.
Right.
Yeah. And so
yeah,
that to me, and you see it in all of these education systems.
Yeah.
Right? Where like a lot of the time, if somebody's being assessed, a teacher's being assessed, all right, it's time to check out how you're doing, Shannon, right? It's not an administrator telling you this. It's your coworkers going like, all right, hey, like, is it all right if I come into your classroom? Let's go see like how things are going. Or you'll come up to somebody and go like, hey, I'm struggling with this, right? Mm-hmm. And you feel comfortable telling a coworker that because their goal isn't going to be to like report you to somebody.
Right.
It's going to be like, all right, how do we fix this problem so that you can become better, so that you can stick around, right?
Yeah. Because
you establish that relationship with those people,
mm-hmm.
right? And so everything, every assessment, everything, every time you're being watched, it's with the aim of making you better.
Yeah.
As opposed to checking off boxes.
Checking off boxes and possibly slapping your wrist and making you feel like maybe I'm going to not get tenured. Maybe I'm not going to get this. Or
right.
Like it's all about the discipline side versus the actually helping each other side.
Yeah, and you see it in the language that admin gives you, because like these meetings are ridiculous, because if you want to get observed, there's a pre-meeting, right? And for us, it was like a pre-meeting, and you have to decide whether you want to be evaluated on a scale of 1 to 4 or on a scale of 1 to 3, which is like, okay, whatever.
Oh, wow.
Like, this is a waste of time.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know, 3, whatever. And then they come in for 15 minutes, half the time they're on their phone, half the time they have to run out because of some emergency or whatever. And then you schedule a post meeting afterwards where they go over all the notes and they tell you things like, I had to give you a 3 here and not a 4 because I didn't see you do this in your classroom, but I know you're good, and like, meanwhile, you're giving the teacher anxiety because they're like, is this going to affect whether or not I get tenureship? Yeah. And then you're like, it's just this huge mess that comes out of all this. We're like, oh, it's stress for everyone. The administrator doesn't want to give you a 3, right? You don't want to get a 3. But these are the games that we have to play, right? To prove to whoever it is up above that's not going to be looking at this anyways that we're doing our jobs. Right? So.
Yeah, no, it's true. There's so many. I'm looking at it going, these are the reasons that I'm no longer in the teaching field.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not in the classroom.
Not in the classroom. But you were in the classroom for
20 years.
20 years.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that there's meaning in that. There's a lot of meaning in like, all right, I invested like 12 years into this. Yeah. You invested 20 years into this. And we both decided, it's just not worth it. Yeah. Right? All the stress, all the pain. And it's so weird, like even the experience of a teacher, because you're putting in like hours and hours of work, and then all of a sudden it just all stops for like 8 weeks or so. Yeah. And you're just like, and it takes like a week to just like get adjusted to like, like, all right, can I relax? Yeah. I can relax. This is okay. This is fine if we relax, right? And then a week or two before school starts again, you just feel it.
The anxiety.
Yeah, it just starts to come back. It's just like, it's coming back. It's too soon.
First day of school. Every year, the first day of school still felt like I was like a kid again. Like, the first day of school is so hard.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that would change if, we could change our ideas about education or change the system itself to being like, hey, no, this is a place where I go to hang out with people that I constantly work with, that I constantly talk to, that we have a collaborative nature with, so you don't feel that much anxiety. I know that I'm not going to be overloaded with work because I'm being given time to do the work afterwards.
That's the big part.
I'm spending less time with the students. I'm more time, like actually grading and developing lessons and working with other people and maybe even doing some research, or maybe even like helping out another new teacher, like get acquainted or whatever, and then getting better results as a result of making those changes. Right? Yeah. Like that's the world that I'm trying to like convey to people.
that
of like,
would be nice.
This is not some fantasy. This exists all over the world, right? The fact that it doesn't exist in the U.S. is mind-boggling. Right? Like
we have more money than every other country.
Spend more.
Oh yeah.
And that's where the friction thing comes into play. In California, we spend I think it's like something like it's between $14,000 and $15,000 per student per year, right? Which is pretty high.
How is that compared to the nation? Do you know?
That is 19th in the nation.
19th, okay.
19th in the nation. 19th. If you look at our like U.S. World News and Report, like where they look at scores, like reading scores, math scores, graduation rates, we're ranked 40th in the United States. The U.S. as a country is like, they're way down there on that list on the PISA scores. Like our math scores, we're basically failing. Yeah. We're there's third world countries out there that are killing us on these math scores.
I'm sure.
Yeah. So it's like, well, something's got to change. It's like, because this is not this is just not acceptable. Like that's the message that I'm trying to convey out there to people. Is like, this is not acceptable. Like, you should not be doing this. Like, so I think one place to start is to like agree on like, well, what's the point of all this? Like, what's the purpose of education? Like, if you got to choose, like you get to be queen of education of California for a day, and you got to choose like, all right, what's the purpose of education, right? What do you want the purpose of the education system to be for, like, your own kids? What would you make that?
It's so open-ended. I'm horrible with these kinds of questions. I mean, I would say preparing them for life, like being able to analyze all the input that they receive every day online, on news, on all these different, like being able to analyze that and determine, like that. I feel like that's a big thing that has to happen in today's society with the internet, and there's so much, you have to separate out and determine, like, is this valid? Is this a source that's, something I should be thinking about? So that, I think, is an important part of education, being able to problem solve, being able to, like, okay, if I come up with, like, this thing happens in my life and I need to be able to solve it, how, what kinds of things can I do? So I mean, I feel like there's so much that education needs to do, but those are two important things. Being able to, be a part of society that's, a useful part of society. Being able to have an understanding of things so that you can work in society, basically, as well.
So there's like a giving back aspect.
Yeah.
And so I'm hearing skills, right? Not just like the skill, like the content specific academic skills, like the life skills. Right? Which are probably way more important than, the subatomic levels.
I don't know. Now we got chemistry. That's more chemistry. Yeah.
But yeah, that's like skills and this element of giving back, like it's almost like a taking responsibility to give back, right? So I emailed Pasi Sahlberg, who wrote all these books on education in Finland, and he goes like, okay, like the purpose of education, like there is the holistic development of students to give them the ability to pursue their passions and give them the skills with which to live their lives, right? Which I'm like, okay, that seems to make sense, right? Because there's that element of skills.
Right.
I like the idea of pursue your passions, but I think that has to be balanced out with the other part that you added in of like, you got to contribute back to society, right? Like part of the reason why you have passions is to try and figure out how you can use those to give back to something bigger than yourself. Right? And I think that's kind of like missing in that purpose there that needs to be added. Of like, look, we're going to give you the skills, right? You're free. You're not free just to like waste your time here, right? You're free so that you can take responsibility for your life. And you can take responsibility for your life by taking responsibility. So there's two aspects, right? So there's your responsibility and then there's your passions, and those two need to be melded together so that you can be A, happy, and B, contributing to the world. Right? I think that's like the better way of kind of putting it.
That seems good.
And I think if we can get people behind this purpose, then it makes everything else like kind of like actionable underneath it. Right? Like, do we need to be spending time monitoring schools, monitoring districts, monitoring teachers, monitoring like administrators? Right? If we're all individuals that have taken responsibility for our lives, that are following our passions, and that are working towards making this a better place. Mm-hmm. Right? And we have the skills to do that.
Yeah, we have the skills to do it, yeah.
Yeah. Like, I can't think of any, like, that makes it actionable. It means that we could do something. Right? And, you know, I look at the websites for CDE, California Department of Education, SB, School Board of Education. And you look at, like, all right, what's the purpose? What's the mission here? Oh, it's to educate students. Well, okay, to educate students?
That's what they really say?
Yeah, that's what it's on. Yeah, you can go on there. You can check it out.
So...
like, well, to what end?
To educate, just, I feel like that you're using the word to define, you know, you're like, that's not really a definition of what it is, you know. To educate.
Yeah.
What is education? To educate. Okay, great. Moving on. Like, what does that mean? That's so weird. I would have thought that they had a
like
vision
something
statement
concrete or
more than
they give us all this time to come up with
I mean, like, that's what they always expect. I'm always horrible at that. That's why I'm like, wait, you didn't could I just say to teach chemistry then? Like, what do you do? I'm teaching chemistry. Because if you're just able to say that, then I can say that, because I am horrible with those kinds of things.
I think if we can get behind that, I think it'll be great.
We just have to change. I think that there's just this idea of no trust in anybody in the whole system. Mm-hmm. And so that just goes down all levels, to the student, to the teacher, to the administrator, everyone. No one trusts anybody. And the parents think that everyone thinks nobody's doing their job.
Right, yeah.
That's basically it. Mm-hmm. Parents think the teachers aren't doing it. The teachers think the parents aren't doing it. The administrators think the teachers aren't doing it. Everyone is thinking that the other person is doing it wrong. Yeah. And so no one's working together to make anything work. And so you're constantly trying to show, I'm actually doing that. Check box, check box, check box. Yeah. You know, and in the end, like, it's just like you're on the hamster wheel and you're just going around.
Yeah. And we gotta ask ourselves, like, is that the world we want to live in? Do we want to live in a world where nobody trusts anybody?
Right.
Like, and if you don't want to live in that world, there's something you can do about it. Mm-hmm. The thing that you can do about it is you can start trusting people. Yeah. Right? Like, at an individual level. Right. Like, I trust you, you trust me. Right. Right? You trust your teachers, you trust, like at an individual level, that's what we can do to build trust. Yeah. Right? On a system-wide level, there are things that we can do. Like, I think I like the expectation of, like, look, if you want to be a teacher, you got to have, like, a master's level of education. Yeah. Right? That builds trust right there.
Yeah, I feel like having a higher expectation of teachers to start with, because right now teachers are not respected.
Yeah. And giving them the supports to do well.
So you make it the pay is going to be decent. You're going to have a good, you're not going to be, at a lower pay. Therefore, you're not going to want to do this job. Even though it's a hard job, you want to do it because there's good pay, there's good resources, there's good benefits, but the support system is good, because even if the pay is great and you are in there with 180 kids a day, pulling your hair out because you've never been taught how to manage people, how to work with all these different personalities, how to teach the subject. You don't have any
experience with any of that?
Yeah, like, it's very daunting. Like, I think so many people are like, just come to my classroom for a day and just see how you do, because they think that teaching is easy until you're forced to, see.
Just come in, I'm going to step out for 15 minutes.
Yeah, you're in charge for 15 minutes and
let's see how that goes.
See how it works for you. Because, all these people who say, teachers, they don't know what they're doing, and they're try it.
Exactly.
Try it. And tell me now what your experiences are, because it's not an easy job. And so if we have support and a program to get us, the credential program that's actually useful, skill set, like, kind of go back to, I'm really fun for the skill set. Yeah. Right? Like, how do I manage these kids? Right. 38 kids in a class that don't want to sit in their seat, and you have to, somehow keep them, focused for an hour.
Yeah, and wouldn't it be great if you were a part of a program where you spent a couple years going into the classroom after you've learned a little bit of skills, trying it out, coming out, reflecting on it, like just for like a couple weeks at a time or something, and getting to have experiences with people that are actually in the classroom.
Right, because you can, having the veteran teachers teaching the new ones coming in and really teaching, not just like you have a half hour here that you're, okay, they're going to do a lesson in your classroom and you're just going to watch and you're going to have a 10-minute like, okay, this is what I saw, what do you think? And that's great, but it's not going to work. It's not going to be enough to make it, it's like you need more than that. Because you can really learn from, like I learned the most from just watching other teachers. Like that was where it wasn't my education classes, it wasn't my master teacher since he wasn't there. I was observing and that's a good idea to do it like that, because even just the littlest things make your life easier in a classroom where you're like, how you pass out materials, how you, just like stupid things that like end up being like really make efficient and like, why have I not been doing it that way all this time? I've like been doing it this hard way. And then you see someone else do it something like, and you're like, all right, I'm going to do that from now on, and it works so much better. So if someone can give you all those little pieces of information when you're starting versus you have to like reinvent the wheel 100 times until you get to the point where you're like, I can't do this anymore because it's too stressful. Because you're also grading, and you're at that time when you're first starting, you're also relearning material, because even like, I was a chemistry major and I have a master's in chemistry, but like teaching chemistry is very different than learning chemistry. So, you're spending time with how to manage, how to do grades, how to write tests, but then also, how do I teach it? How do I teach this content to make them understand? How do I set up a lab? How do I clean it? How do I make sure that they're safe? There's like, now I think about it, how did I even do all that when I started? Right?
How do you keep track of your stock room?
Totally, all of that, like, and make sure that so many things to think about, that you're just like you understand why many teachers leave after the first 2 years. I forget what the number. You probably know.
I think it's 30% of teachers leave teaching within the first 6 years. 5 or 6 years. Yeah.
I feel like that number is even higher now. No.
Yeah, since that number was pre-pandemic.
Okay, because I feel like post-pandemic, that's got to be
post-pandemic. It's
like 40.
Maybe even 50. Yeah, it's really high.
Yeah, and even teachers who are like us, experienced teachers who are leaving, not just the like 2-3 year in.
It was a gut punch, like that distance learning. It felt like somebody took all the parts that I like about teaching, removed them, and kept all the crappy parts.
That's true. Exactly.
I was just like, what? Like, I don't get to talk to these kids.
No.
Like, I don't get to have like just a chat. I don't get to have like
that connection with
that connection. Like, and because my district made some interesting policies in that they didn't require the students to have their cameras on.
Yeah,
which was like, all right, I'm talking to 30 blank screens now.
Yes.
And nobody's responding. And then when I do get somebody to respond, it's pretty clear that they're on their bike with their friends outside.
Right?
And just doing this over the phone,
Yes, the phone.
I'm like, why is it so loud in your room?
Totally.
It's like, oh, okay.
Teaching to a screen that's black, all the blank screens, it's just impossible. It's I'm just sitting here talking to myself, okay, and I didn't do it in a classroom setting, but I actually still did a tutoring program and with it was all online, and it was a group of 10 kids or so, and same thing, the beginning of the pandemic, they would turn their cameras on.
At least you got that.
The beginning, and then the second year, like I did this program, nobody did, and even though I kept saying, you guys are, and they're paying for this program, right? They're paying for this, and I'm like, I need to see your eyes. I need to see.
If you want this to go better,
I need to see if you're getting it, and the way I can see that is by looking at you. And I know we don't always want to have the camera on, but it really helps me teach, and I think it'll be beneficial. And I say all this, and then like one person turns it on for a little while, and then they're like, turn it off. Like,
oh, none of you guys are doing this? Oh, never mind.
I'm going to be the only one with the camera on. I don't think so.
Yeah.
And it's gone again. I'm like, all right, back to a blank screen here. So I'll just do my song and dance to myself.
Yeah. The best I could do was I got 10 students to do it, and it was all like the top of their head.
Yes. That's they always have the camera like facing. You can see like the fan on the ceiling and like a forehead. Possibly.
Oh, okay.
That was the extent.
Well, it's progress.
Yes, exactly. I'm like, well, your camera's on. Okay, I cannot see your eyes, but okay, I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So exactly, all the good things were gone, and so I look at my friends who are still teaching, and I feel like they're just pulling their hair out every day, and that's something has to give, because these people are amazing teachers who can give so much, but there's only so much you can give before you're just done. Mm-hmm. And that's what I've seen a lot of like veteran teachers are just done, and many of them are just at some point just doing their time for retirement and like getting their years in for retirement, but that's not good for anybody.
No,
students,
because you're losing human capital.
Yeah.
Right, like the students are like not getting the best teachers.
So they're gonna know that you're just putting in time because you can feel it, and so it's a tough job, and when you're not respected and felt like feel trusted, it just feels like, why am I doing this again?
Right. Yeah.
And so now with my tutoring, at least I work one-on-one with the kid where I can feel like at least that connection with the student and like the parent directly, and it's like a different focus on education. My goal is just, there's no grade coming from me. It's just me like trying to get you to understand chemistry and enjoy it, and
so it's a little bit more fun, a little bit more like playfulness. And that's that voluntariness nature is, again, like that's another, like Finland does this a lot with their students. It's like, look, like we don't have like grades. Like there's no 9th grade, there's no 10th grade, there's no 11th grade. Like it's like, instead it's like you have these classes that you need to take. These are your units. A third of them are your choice. 2/3 of them we choose.
Right.
You can get them done in any order that you want, whenever you want. Like, just choose them, and as long as you just do them, like you're all good, right? And we'll just motivate you to kind of keep you on track and stuff, right? But it's all choice, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't want to take this class, don't take it. Like take these other classes, right? And that's like seems like a very good way, because the kids, you got to give them autonomy. Right, in order to get them to be productive, right? It's like you got to feel like your choices A matter, like you or B you're free to do them. A matter in that like you're taking hold of your future, right? You also got to feel like a sense of mastery, meaning like each thing that you do has to be just a little bit above your current capabilities, right? And for some students, like you see this play out with math a lot, is like they'll fail their algebra class freshman, sophomore, junior, all of a sudden they pass. That's because they developed that maturity. But if you gave them the choice of like, hey, like, look, algebra, all their classes are broken up into like these 6-week chunks, right? You take the first chunk of algebra, you're like, I can't wrap my head around this, right? Then it's like, all right, take these other classes, come back to it later. Right? When you feel like your brain has grown, is matured, you understand it better, you understand yourself better. And then they come back and they have like an incredibly high graduation rate. Like as a country, it's like over 99%, which is incredible, and they're given all those supports to do it. We didn't get too much into this time about like the student perspectives of it all, but I think, we can start with teachers and then we can go into like the experience that will trickle down to the experiences of the students as well. But that element of play or choice, so you got autonomy, you got mastery, and the last one is just like relatedness. And that's what makes the distance stuff so hard.
Yeah.
Right? Like I need to feel like, think about your experiences as a student.
Yeah.
Right? You felt the best and you worked the hardest for those teachers that you made that connection with. Right?
Totally.
And that's where the relatedness comes into play. Is like you got to make those connections, and doing it over the screen or over long distance. Like if both people are participating, you can get some of it. You know.
Yeah.
You can get a lot of it, but nothing beats like me in front of you. We get along. You know, we're playful with each other, but I still have these expectations of you.
Yes.
And you go for it and you try to meet them because of that relationship, you know?
Yeah.
And that's the last aspect and I think if these three things are incorporated into the experiences of the students, right, then you'll start to see them skyrocket.
Yeah.
Right? And really take off. But if they don't have these things, then it's like we have our current system.
Yeah.
You know?
We have the current system.
You don't get to choose. You have to take this class whether you're ready or not. And, you know, sometimes, you know, your teacher's just going to fall asleep in front. Yeah. If you, you hear those stories of like,
I've seen and heard many stories. I was the teacher that all the students would tell me all the stories.
The horror
all their
stories.
other classes. And they're like, what? That doesn't happen in class. They're like, oh, yes, it does. And I was like, huh. Wow.
Yeah.
So
it's like...
And you think, wow, okay, this is why the administration doesn't trust teachers.
Yeah.
Because some of them are sleeping in class.
Yeah.
Like guitar
maybe
class.
Mr. Smith should retire.
Yes, exactly. And so...
But they're just trying to hold out for that extra year.
Exactly. They need that one more year. So when they retire, they get that extra golden handshake or whatever.
85%, you know.
Exactly. So, then you're like, okay, this is why they don't trust us. And they're thinking everyone's doing nothing productive in these meetings. And so... it just becomes a cycle.
Yeah.
And everyone just is on the checkbox list. Okay, let's do more checkbox.
Yeah.
And then it becomes the system we have today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a good place to end it.
It sounds good.
Thank you very much, Shannon.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. This is fun.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Less is More Education podcast. I also wanted to give out some book recommendations to kind of let you guys know what I'm reading and things that have been helping me out a lot and things that I've wished that I read while I was teaching. The first one is Free to Learn by Peter Gray, which is an awesome book that kind of shows you the power of play and how it can be used to educate. And also Getting Things Done by David Allen, which the title just tells you what it's about. It's just about how to get a lot of things done without having to stress about every little thing. Also, if you want to help me out on my journey, the best thing you can do is recommend the podcast to your friends and family. Together, we can make real changes. I'm also looking for stories from you. And it doesn't matter if you're a teacher, counselor, whoever. I have a big question for you guys. What experience in school stuck with you the most? You can get a hold of me through the email at lessismore.education@skiff.com. Skiff is spelled SKIFF. You can also reach out to us on Instagram at lessismore.education, on Twitter at lessismoreeduc1. Our website is lessismore.education, and our YouTube link is going to be below in the description. If you want to support us, you can visit patreon.com/lessismoreeducation. Thank you very much.